Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about some of the biggest news that's really occurred in Star Wars in quite some time that is not positive, that is a major failure, which is canceling of Acolyte Season 2. Now, this video is going to be a little different, and the reason why it's different, of course, all these timestamps are going to be listed in the description down below, as well as in the comment, but I think I'm going to be able to add a different perspective here, and one that I guarantee a lot of you guys watching these videos, especially on the Acolyte, might find a little refreshing. Because I really feel like I'm one of you guys. I mean, granted, of course, I'm doing YouTube, but I'm trying to build this channel based on following the logic rather than the extremism that is always occurring. Now, I used to watch Star Wars a lot, and I grew up on Star Wars. And of course, I'm going to be an unbiased opinion because I haven't watched it in quite some time. And so I've been looking at the situation from an outside lens. I've been following it closely because I've been kind of waiting for Star Wars to kind of recoup itself, because I was never a Star Trek fan. I was always a Star Wars fan. And I really want this franchise to succeed. Nobody wants to see something fail. And of course, what comes up must come down. It always occurs, whether it's Marvel, whether it's Star Wars, whether it's something great, right? But right now we have some really extreme perspectives, almost like a culture war. If you go on YouTube, right now there's a massive celebration for it. And we're going to discuss that in a lot more detail. A lot of us, I believe, sit right in the middle, not to be a fence sitter, but are following things logically. And we're not in the extremism of one side or the other. And we're just normal people trying to just find some entertainment and live in this world that we call Earth, essentially. So let's talk about some of the problems with Acolyte that I have viewed from an outside perspective, especially for somebody who's not highly invested, but it's kind of waiting for it. I think a lot of you guys are. I mean, I don't know how many people are actually watching the show, but of course, if you're a Star Wars fan, you're waiting for when is Star Wars actually going to become good again? So honestly, what was the goal of this series? The Acolyte's a little confusing because it doesn't feel like it has necessarily a goal in mind. Maybe you're trying to expand the overall universe and maybe with a new set of characters. But when we think about early Marvel, when you're starting to sow the seeds and say these are the characters you're supposed to fall in love with, they're not really tied to the main story. And a television series usually enhances a story that is associated with a movie, or it builds up to say we're going to make a movie in the long run. And while it does take a whole different interpretation, it moves a whole different direction, I think the problem as we go into the next sub-subject here is the changing of that story. There's a lot of people who follow this fan base, even myself, to be honest, where I know a lot of Star Wars history and lore, and I would even consider myself the biggest fan. But when things change in a story that don't necessarily follow what you have already become accustomed to, and it really starts to break the immersion, and it really starts to disjoint. Who are you rooting for? What is the goal? Is it going to be light versus dark? You know, it was always a very clear depiction of seeing red versus blue lightsaber in terms of like color depiction, or, you know, light versus dark, you know, the light force, you know, the Sith energy is very negative. You know, there's always this, it kind of highlighted those things of what you should be rooting for and what you shouldn't. Now, at the same time, there are definitely interesting stories such as the Grey Jedi and introducing them as well. And I apologize if I misspeaking of what they are. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But besides the point that there is also a silver lining and making an interesting story that exists there, I guess we can kind of fall back in terms of a story that could be interesting. When I first saw a stormtrooper Finn kind of rebelling, what that story could look like, and could we have gotten a richer lore there, and seeing that come to life. And I really wanted to know more about that story and have it be hard-hitting, of like PTSD or understanding, make them more relatable. But at the same time, it kind of feels like it's brushed aside. It's almost like there's a fear of going that direction, even though, which is very weird when we talk about culture war, we're looking for diversity, but it's almost like people are afraid to tell those stories because they're either afraid to offend people, or if they're trying to offend people, they're not even going in the right artistic direction, which is also, leads to the next point. Is this made to send a political message rather than an artistic one? I'll give an example. When Aliens came out, the movie, the sequel of Alien, Sigourney Weaver's character, Ripley, was a very powerful female protagonist, amazing female protagonist that demanded to be listened to, that was in charge, that spoke openly about how she felt about situations. And also the cast was extremely diverse, but it wasn't part of like in your face. It was just like already accepted of that's the way the world is supposed to be. And that's the way I believe our current world should be. I think however which way, and this is, I'm going to kind of blend some of this of my own opinion and circle back with the problem with Acolyte, is I grew up in musical theater where I didn't really care what you liked or didn't like, or how you felt about somebody else, and whether you were straight, gay, non-binary, demi, it doesn't matter. It never mattered because it was just so socially accepted of how I grew up, because it doesn't matter. Because what matters more is a story and people. People watching this YouTube video, essentially, we're all on the same playing field. It really doesn't matter how you feel about something. What matters more is the story that we're trying to tell or trying to entertain, rather than sending some sort of political statement. And I guess this is where the extremism and culture war is occurring. And I feel like it's overtaking a lot of what we see in Hollywood today. And I would say this is the problem when it comes to Acolyte, where is this grounded in telling a very powerful story that is already organic in its way of this character is integral because of X, Y, and Z. I'll give an example when it comes to storytelling. You don't have to tell me a character is powerful. You just show the audience that a character is powerful. When it comes to Aliens and seeing Sigourney Weaver just start demanding and powering over the troops versus, let's say, Miss Marvel, it almost has to be explained that Miss Marvel should be respected rather than just already commanding respect on the screen. And it doesn't matter how you feel about certain things. When somebody showcases that presence, you automatically respect it without having to send a demanding presence, which is why I say whenever, growing up in musical theater and that world, I mean, nobody had to demand it. Everyone just automatically was listened to, and it's how it was. I know, let's move out of my bubble for a minute. That's not always how the world operates. But not everything has to send a political message. It just has to be one that said, this is just how the world is. And it doesn't have to be in your face. And so because some of the messaging, in my opinion, is almost forgetting what Star Wars is, and to be honest, I don't even know what Star Wars is anymore. And that's the problem with Acolyte, is like, what are you even trying to enhance in the overall story? Is it about Anakin Skywalker anymore? Well, then you're already starting to change that story and backstory of it already, which is already going to frustrate and make a lot of people upset based on that lore. Is it about the rebellion? Where do they sit? Well, I don't really understand the context of where the rebellion's at anymore, or what is the shape of that war. And to be honest, I don't think anybody really understands the shape of the war, besides if you probably read the comics and try to piece it together. Whose side, who's winning, who's losing, where's the power shift occurring? And I guarantee if you're watching this video, I don't even think you know where that is. And that's the problem with the story. I want to know in the Acolyte, where in the war are we? Why is this important? What does it lead to in the war? How does that upset and balance? And listen, when we look at Star Wars, there's always going to be prejudice against specific groups, because even when it comes to any futuristic, let's look at The Expanse. There's a very clear, and Expanse, I think, is a very well-written show. I think it does a very good job. Is it the best? I don't really know, but I think it's well-written, where you have people who grew up with gravity versus those who did not. And so even though they're not even talking about their skin tone, they're talking about how their bodies can impact of what they feel comfortable with. There is a social divide there. And that's an interesting story to kind of invest into. But I don't really know what to invest into. And I challenge you, the viewer, to comment as well. What is the story of Star Wars now? I used to think it was the rebelling against the Empire, right? And they were trying to fight for their freedom, but I honestly don't even know of being repressed, of how they were running the world, or not half the world, the galaxy. One was just trying to become one collective giant empire rather than being a open and essentially free, diverse one. I maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, listen, I watched these as a kid, and so I didn't really obsess, but that's kind of what I got out of it. And I guarantee somebody will comment, and that's okay. That's the whole point of this. Because if I am the average person watching this, right, and I don't understand what in the world's going on, then how are we supposed to anticipate? Because I'm kind of an idiot. So how am I supposed to anticipate anybody else understands what this is? I'm not saying you have to handhold anybody, but the war and the mission has to be super clear to all of us, the viewer. And because of that, let's talk about even more downsides here. Hollywood needs accountability, because if that work isn't being put in and it's just done with some sort of statement, I don't even care what statement on what version you live in. I want to live in a world that everyone can just play nice in a sandbox, and anybody, as long as you're not hurting somebody else, it doesn't matter what you do, as long as you're not hurting another person, right? But Hollywood needs accountability here, because if we're not focusing on stories and film, what are we focusing on? And what is your mission? And that mission needs to be pretty clear, because then people will choose an impact with their wallets and their time. And let's be honest, another problem here, I guarantee there's a lot of good people that lost their jobs. Well, I know people are saying, let's celebrate, congratulations, the Acolyte is canceled. Well, then what if we don't get more Star Wars? What if it doesn't get invested into? What if the people that have, all the way at the top decide, you know what, let's not do this anymore, and just say it's impossible to fix because we've dug ourselves too deep? And to be honest, I mean, that could be a decision. And so we'll never get another good Star Wars, right? And then I get also like, hey, outrage gets views, from both sides. That's why I say Hollywood's to blame too. If they're just trying to go for outrage culture just to get people upset and mad about this, congrats, you got your views. And what about the people who are making video content just constantly bashing? And trust me, I go down that rabbit hole as well. I've seen a lot of these videos and I watch them, and this is kind of a rant video, but listen, it's almost like the people kind of need to take back the fact that there's this like extremism on all ends going on. And I just think that there's a middle ground here of just realism of which people can live. And like I said, it's naive, it's a little crazy, but I'm making this video because the Acolyte really just highlights that big problem, and in my opinion. And I just want to watch something that's entertaining. And sometimes it goes into uncomfortable spots, but that's what also art is. Art does push those things that we're not talking about, or it makes a mockery of us in terms of comedy. It's like when comedy almost feels like it's died out. I mean, I'm a minority myself. I mean, let's just be honest. So if like my race is being made fun of, at least I'm being acknowledged. And as long as it's done within like, from a comedic standpoint, to like, sometimes we have to look outwards and just make fun of ourselves. We have to look at the outrageousness of what we're doing so then we can move forward. And I think that's what comedy is about. I think that's what art's about. I think that's what film is about. I think it's about pushing not some political agenda, but one that just moves on unity and telling a very powerful and great story of character development and growth as people. And if they grow in the wrong direction, then we see it as you can call it a telltale of somebody doing something bad. Because realistically, I'm sorry for just like ranting about this, but this video is a lot longer, but I know I had a mission here at the start, and I had a lot of bullet points, but at the very end here, it's going to be a little more ranty, because that's just kind of where we're at. But at the end of the day, I hope that people look at this and realize that it's not all good, but it's not all bad. But we need some accountability. People lost jobs. There's outrage going on. Not everything is a win here. But at the same time, everyone needs to be better across the board. From an outside lens looking at the situation, it's kind of crazy. There's been a lot of creators that I've seen involved with this. And I understand the frustration of having something that you love and care about and wanting the best for it. But at the same time, all it's doing is also creating a divide. So what can we do to create more unity? And sometimes I guess you can call me out and just kind of call BS and say, well, the only way to make change is by revolting, kind of like they did in Star Wars, right? Well, I agree with that, but I wish there was a better way to go about it. And I hope that the best happens for Star Wars. I hope the message is pretty clear, but at the same time that, listen, I think it's been resonated many times before that we should all live in a world where people can live happy and do what they want without hurting. As long as you're not hurting somebody else, I don't really care. Listen, it doesn't bother me. But then I just worry, and it kind of, I guess we can say, cautionary tale at this point, whatever word you want to use at the end here to close out the video, is just the massive concern of where things go whenever you see just the logical people who watch this video. What happens when they go to those opposite ends, and then we circle back to a culture war. Comment down below what you think. I saw this news. I've been following it a lot. I care about Star Wars, so sorry for the rant here at the end. I don't have an answer. I don't have a solution, so maybe this video is kind of pointless, but at the same time, hey, I do think that it sparks such a really good moment in time for all of us to discuss. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. See you guys all in the next one.